Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final session of our series Lead, Feel, Connect, a space for sharing and growing. The sessions are pro bono on both sides. I'm Anne Kampf, your host today. Most of you know me as a physicist, but surprise, I also read faces. Yeah, the physicist became a physiognomist. Face reading, it's not fortune telling. Face reading is actually pattern recognition. Used responsibly, it becomes structured method for understanding people with greater clarity, empathy, and accuracy. Your face reveals things you may not even want to admit to yourself. And I even wrote about this in my book, Red Thread Occult to Science and Beyond. Today, we will talk about the unspoken language of leadership, habitual expressions, and psychosomatics. And for that, I have the perfect guest, Linda Thackeray, director and founder of the Face and Body Interpreter, international trainer, psychosomatic therapist, and one of the few people who can look at your face and understand your emotional habits. She reads patterns of thought, emotion, behavior, and the hidden stories held in the body tensions and pain. Linda, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
And thank you for the invite. It's just an absolute pleasure to be here and to meet with you and share my passion, which is, face reading and psychosomatic therapy. So thank you for the invite.
You're very welcome. I want to start with a moment everything shifted for you. What made you step out of corporate life? Because I know you were also part of a corporation and choose your psychosomatics and face reading.
I guess there were two significant moments. And the first one was experiencing a face reading for myself. And I've always been interested in people and behavior and connection. Always loved my job in corporate, but the people connection was incredibly important. When I had a face reading, what I was shocked to witness about myself is that I was presenting something different to the world than what I was actually feeling on the inside. And it resonated because I knew both sides of my personality that was reflected on both the right side of my face and the left side.
Mm,
The
well,
second part was I actually had an accident, and within that accident that I didn't have time to completely heal. And I was already involved in the world of psychosomatics, and I decided to leave. I was general manager of the company. So I decided to leave, and they gave me this beautiful opportunity of staying whilst setting up my own business. So I had about a 10-year transition, um, setting up both my business before I literally left to pursue this full time just before COVID hit.
very insightful story. Um, Linda, what is the difference between micro expressions and habitual expressions?
Okay, so some of you may have heard about Paul Ekman's work. And Paul Ekman, he was responsible for discovering micro expressions. And the expressions are so quick, they can quite often flitter across the face without
Right.
too much notice. A habitual expression is different in that we're looking at the same expression being done thousands and thousands of times. And that expression actually changes some of the facial features and creates form in a different way to how a feature would naturally look. So when you're looking at someone's face, you can see what type of long-term emotional pattern has been in place for the feature to actually change its form.
Mm. Leadership is not only about what is said, but it's also about what is expressed. How do our faces emotions and posture reveal what words can't?
Most of communication is nonverbal. And I think a lot of the leadership teams would be very aware of the importance of body language, but not everyone is aware of how much is actually expressed through posture and through the habitual expressions. And even, learning about hand placement, where if you're looking at someone's face and you're on Zoom as an example, where this finger may present on the face.
Mm.
Um, the pointer finger being the judgment finger. If it's sitting across the lips, it's an expression, but it also tells us, particularly if it's held tightly, that the person may have something different to say.
Right.
So
Or that he or she disagrees, right?
that she or yeah, totally. So, like, if I'm doing a presentation or if I'm doing teaching and I notice a student or um, a client is doing this, I will actually ask them if they have like something different to offer.
Right. Um, Linda, I know you prepared also some slides to go through to better show the difference between micro expressions and habitual expressions. So if you'd like to share, or
Yeah, thank you.
and for the audience, we will not have a special Q&A session. So whenever you have a comment or a question, just write it in the comment section on LinkedIn and we will be able to see it, and we are pleased to answer you.
Okay. From my side, I have pressed. Yeah, thank you. So one of the areas that I think is really important when you're looking at leadership, when you're looking at teams, and even when you're looking at yourself and self-mastery is the greatest challenge when it's mastered becomes one of the greatest gifts. And that is one of the core principles of psychosomatics, of face reading, because it works from the basis that we're not judging or making a judgment on a person. We're actually trying to understand what are their gifts, what are their challenges, and to create a bridge between gifts and challenges. So, as we take a look at a micro expression, we can see this young girl that has a pout on her face.
Mm.
And it's in the moment, you can see very clearly that 2 seconds later, she's going to be smiling, she's going to be happy, and that pout will no longer be there. But if circumstances had it that she continued to pout for her whole life, the actual form of the facial features will start to change. So as an adult, that bottom lip will start to come out, it will start to droop. And so she would have basically a long-term pout that would be represented on her face. We see people that have the habitual glow of happiness on the inside, and there's certain things like the crow's feet at the end of the face or the end of the eyes that start
Mm.
to uplift and show an uplifting, happy disposition. So we see those things without really consciously registering them. We also recognize when we see some features that show a medium term emotional situation. So we know it's current. We know it's current when we see pink. We know it's current when we see tears. But then you can also start to see some patterns that would indicate both short term and medium term currency. Some of the features that show up as long term are features like the little girl that we see, and we see that there's a white starting to show underneath her eyes. And when someone wants to stop crying, basically, if you lift your eyes up, you can stop yourself crying by lifting the eyes. When the body does that naturally, It's usually around mental or emotional overwhelm. And just by understanding that, if you notice that within a team that float had occurred, you would notice that the person may be under some mental emotional stress and may require some additional support. So it can be very helpful to notice this. Other
Indeed.
features that change are some of the softer features in the face. They'll change more readily than some of the more harder features. And again, we not only see sometimes an imprint, but we also see long-term patterns. So around the mouth, when we see that the mouth is starting to narrow, we may know that someone is holding back over a long period of time what they want to say, and that becomes a habitual pattern. You'll notice that two of these people have two lines showing between their eyebrows, and these lines are called focus lines, and they show an incredible focus both in work life and in private life as well.
Right. And those lines are also called the famous 11, right?
The famous 11, absolutely. And when you see lines like this, and you might be looking at your photo of your face, or remember when you've looked in the mirror this morning that you actually have these lines appearing on your face. So, with many of the features within face reading and within psychosomatics, there are gifts and there are challenges. So, it doesn't mean to say that you're always operating with the gift, nor are you operating with the challenge. But the gift is focus. So, this is someone who has a lot of focus, mental focus, and usually people that have a lot of mental focus have a lot of responsibilities, whether real or perceived. They feel the weight of responsibilities. And out of balance, there can be frustration because they may find it sometimes more difficult to communicate around what their needs are.
Yeah. Um, you bring together face reading, habitual expressions, awareness, and psychosomatic therapy in your work. How do these elements connect and what makes them so transformative when applied together?
Okay, so face reading and the expressions and the psychosomatic therapy, you're looking at the mind and the body and the interaction of both of them working together. And sometimes when we take a look at patterns that have presented over a long period of time, you're looking at coping mechanisms that really worked well for an individual at a point in time in their life. But the pattern continues, even though it may not serve them well in all of the environments that they're exposed to. So, as we bring them together, we're doing self reflection, self awareness around how, firstly, are you leading yourself before you would actually take that into more of a team setting, more of a corporate environment, into a leadership setting. But everything from how a body is aligned in terms of its posture, the rack and stack of the body, the position of the head. You'll notice a lot of people these days, the head is coming forward and forward and forward, which means that a person's head is not aligned to their body.
Mm.
It's actually aligned outside of themselves, which can create some challenges in really reading their own cues. So as a person starts to make some changes through breath, through posture, through awareness, and taking a look at their internal dialogue, it can start to shift some of those long-term habitual patterns. And the face literally starts to shift and change as well, being a reflection of what's actually occurring in the body.
Right. The face and the posture are changing our entire life um, based on what we experience and the emotions we experience and we um, acknowledge. Let's explore the architecture of the face. Face splits are one of the most confronting and revealing tools in this work, right? Um, what makes face splits so unique?
And it was for me, it was the face splits that actually really drew me in. Having a conversation is one thing, but seeing a face split where it's basically cut in half and then the two halves flipped so that you have two rights and two lefts together, the right-hand side being the public face and the left-hand side being the private. When you see two people that are having a completely different experience and you haven't actually noticed that your face isn't symmetrical, it can be quite shocking. And
Mm,
for me, it was profoundly shocking because my right and my left, not only did they not look like they were from the same family of people, but they didn't look like they were friends. And when when there's not a friendship happening on the inside that is going to present in the way that you are to the outside world, and it takes a lot of energy to create an image that everything's okay where on the inside it's not.
right. Linda, this being said, I'm handing myself over to you. You have my face splits here, left side and
Okay.
right side, and original.
And I must say, you're very brave, Anne, and the congruency of your face is very good. So let's just take a look. This is the photo that you sent into me. And as you can see, it's the standard photo, right and left sides have been marked. And then basically mirror imaged two right sides. And the right side is the public face.
Mm,
It's known for the left brain domination. We refer to it as masculine because it's action orientated. It's basically a positive charge. So it's all about doing, it's about logic, it's about practicality because it's the left brain domination. And it's the mask that we create and the visible personality out into the world. So, how you project your confidence. And as we look at this photo, one of the areas that I've noticed particularly is your really beautiful combination of masculine and feminine energy. When we look at straight lines, we tend to look at the more logical, more practical side, and we see that with your eyebrows. And yet we've got the really soft characteristics that are associated with the feminine energy. So a really nurturing, strong presence that you present here.
For me, when I start learning about face reading, what s- stayed with me is that the principle of polarity and duality is also here to be found. As you said, we have a masculine side and a feminine side. You mentioned also earlier um, that our strength, gifts, might be also sometimes challenges for us. So,
Absolutely. Are you asking me about your challenges?
yes.
Okay. Let's take a look at your private side first, and then it will give us a better picture of how that presents. So your private side is governed by the right side of the brain. It's the intuitive, it's the creative, and it's often the unseen. It's the private that literally only people that are close to you would normally see. And we notice as we've gone from one to the other that there are some differences, but it's not till you see them side by side that we start to notice the main differences between the polarities and the duality of the right and the left sides.
Mhm.
So when I'm working with a client, I would normally ask them firstly, not so much what I see at this stage, because I will have already gone through all of their strengths and some of their challenges. As we come to this part, I would normally ask, what is it that you notice? However, I'm very happy to share as well some of the areas that I notice. And one of the main things that jump out as a gift, I'm going to mention the gift first, is that your photos look like they're from the same family of people. So as soon as you take a look at two photos looking like they're from the same family, there's already a close connection. They also look like on a good day that they're going to get along very well.
Hmm.
So what I tend to look at is how would they show up on a bad day and an out of balance day? And you can see that there's a little bit more tension in the right-hand picture than what there is on the left. And that's the first jump out feature. So I can see that your eyes are pointing just that little bit further in on the right side. And it tells
Mhm.
me that sometimes that you might worry and overanalyze things. Um, and as a result of that, plus um, with your nose and some of the more chiseled features, you've got pretty high expectations of yourself. And so
I
again, there's some gifts with that because that creates that creates really great work. The challenge with it is the internal pressure that you can place on yourself.
it's very true. I only compete with myself. So I want to be, you know, this saying that we hear on social media, the best version of myself. I do not necessarily agree with it, but I try to, or actually, I'm doing things, exercises, I'm reading in order for me to improve every day in all the ways I can improve. And yeah, I'm a bit harsh with me sometimes.
So by by and large, your gifts jump out to me before I see your challenges. And it's nice when I see that. Um, the other area that I see, which may or may not be a challenge, it would require for you to sort of say if it's a challenge, but I'm just looking at the bridge of your nose coming down. And I know that you can be quite straight to the point with your communication. And I'm also seeing that you're very independent. So your face speaks about collaboration and it speaks about this availability out to the world. But this particular feature has a different theme. And when you look at a different theme, it's like that's usually going to present as a conflict for a person to navigate.
Indeed, I I used to say for years now that I'm not a very diplomatic person, um, and this is because, as you mentioned, I am very straightforward, also in communication, and sometimes in my early years when I was younger, um, probably because I had also a lack of experience, I was just, you know, saying exactly what it was on my mind without sugarcoating. While the years passed, I learned to express myself also in a way that keeps the essence of what I want to communicate, but it's not um, harsh towards the others. And
Nice.
I'm still working on it.
Work in progress is always good.
Yeah, and I love working in groups, in teams. I love the team dynamics. I love the fact that people are not um, equal in the sense of that we have all the same um, gifts. Um, I like when we share and when we learn from each other.
And so I think it's important in a team that the gifts that everybody brings are acknowledged and the fact that there is a diverse range of gifts within every team.
Yeah.
Okay. And even though you said that you've learnt diplomacy, I do see you as a very nurturing person. It's within your framework, within your high cheekbones. The cheekbones also speak about building rapport,
Mm.
and unconsciously, it's one of those areas of the face that people will share with you some very, deep insights about themselves that they may not share with other people based on your cheekbones. So it's really great in building rapport as well. And your chin comes forward. So the chin, when it comes forward like this, I actually refer to this as the advocate's chin.
Yeah.
And usually in the younger days, it can be around competition. So if it's teams, it's like the team is going to go well. If it's individual, the individual is going to do well. But as the advocate, there's a lot around integrity, fairness, a sense of justice, and sticking up for people that may not have a voice. And you're showing that characteristic also quite strongly.
I I do love fairness, but for me, fairness it's not about equal treatment in every case, but about making choices that consider compassion and context. Yes.
Nice. Lovely. Okay. So the next picture has the original picture. And again, when working with this picture, it can be really helpful to actually recognize that on a bad day, it's only a part of you that's actually having a bad day. And this is part of the resourcing within psychosomatics, to be able to take a breath, recognize that there's a part, and to start to understand where that part's voice comes from, because often it is from a pattern from childhood. And this is where, in addition to teamwork, where I might work with a team, it's really important to do the individual one-on-one work. And the one-on-one gives the ability to actually see some of the blind spots that you have, and then particularly for leadership, as a leader, then to own those things, reframe those challenges into a very different way of learning how to relate to yourself differently. And this is quite often where the internal dialogue, if there is something that was out of balance, this is a really good tool, an effective tool, to start to notice who's speaking.
Right. Linda, how does someone begin to integrate the split to bring their inner and outer worlds back into harmony?
So once they've had an awareness of what their gifts and challenges are, they might start to recognize how the person is on a good day and a bad day. So as I mentioned to you, I concentrate more on the bad day,
Mhm.
and particularly with your photos, I would say on a good day is a good day. So on a bad day, yours don't show up with too much discrepancy, but for some people, it can show up very, very differently. And I might just move to the next slide here. So the next slide, you can see that the two right sides of this lady appear to be a very confident, strong, robust individual, and she is all of those things. On the left, she's looking a lot more sensitive. There's a lot more overexposure, a lot more vulnerability, and she's a lot less confident than what she's presenting to the outside world. So on a bad day, her left side is going to want to disappear. And on a bad day, the right-hand side one could get somewhat frustrated because she's going to be misunderstood.
Mm.
So once she learns how to regulate that by firstly recognizing her own thoughts on a bad day, then she's able to start to regulate what is actually occurring in the moment. And it's a process, but it's a process that can be learnt, really quite quickly once people have a really good understanding of where their challenges have arrived, what their gifts are, and how they're being to themselves.
Um, for leaders who want to begin exploring this, let's say now, what's one simple face reading cue awareness exercise you'd recommend?
So, the very first thing I would recommend is we look naturally at people's right-hand side face. We shake hands, the right-hand side comes across and it shakes hand with the right-hand side. My public face meets your public face. The private faces don't actually connect. So to actually take a look, take a breath, connect with both the right and look at the left. And this can be really important in conflict resolution. When you're noticing that someone's attitudes aren't what you would expect them to be, to connect in with the left, you're actually connecting with that part of them that's more authentic. And when I say authentic, it's not necessarily deliberately more authentic. It's just a natural personality. The mask that we create has got the environment that's been created, the conditions that actually create some of the personality traits we might find difficult to accept. So as you connect with the left, you're meeting a completely different part of the personality. And it's great in conflict resolution. As I said, I did some Teams work and I had this beautiful young girl, she would have been in her 20s, working in a male-dominated area, cold calling. And she had this style of look. And I said to her, plus she also smiled, habitually smiled. And I said to her, "What happens when the smile doesn't work
Mm.
with some of your male clients?" And she just went, "That's not good." And and it's like, "Can you give me some more information? What happens for you?" And she would have, like, close to panic attacks, massive anxiety. And so I gave her this technique to work with, and the next time that I saw her, she came back and she said it was one of the best meetings that she had. Instead of being intimidated, she took a breath, she looked the person on the left-hand side and was able to notice a different side of their personality, plus also rely on her technical skills rather than a smile.
Very important. Linda, we talked about the duality of the face.
Yes.
But I know that while reading face, there is also this so-called three-plane technique.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I know that when reading faces, we also look at the three-plane technique.
Ah, yes.
Maybe we can detail a bit about that.
Yes. So when you're looking at the three areas of the face, we have the mental zone, which is from the eyebrows up to the hairline. We have the emotional zone, which is the bottom of the eyebrows to the tip of the nose. And then we have the physical zone or the action zone from the tip of the nose down to the chin. So if you've got someone similar to the gentleman at the end, he has three very strong zones. I think it, I feel it, I put it into action. One of his challenges as a leader could be the lack of understanding that he has a gift. And when you do something with ease and grace, there can be an expectation that everyone else should do it in the same way, particularly if they benchmark themselves as, well, I'm just an average kind of person. So my benchmark is basically here, I'm normal, which means that the rest of the team, if they're not achieving to the same standard, are underachieving. So that's an example of where it doesn't have the challenge at first glance, but he may have the challenge. And this one consistently shows up with people that have good symmetry as well between left and right and 3 equal zones.
Yeah.
Where you have a really large mind, you'd normally have to be part of the decision-making process. So the mind basically speaks of the intellectual stimulation that you get, the capacity to think creatively. And so when decisions are being made, you need to know why. So as a leader, looking at someone who has this really large forehead, being told to do something without understanding the logic behind it is really difficult to get engagement from the team. They need to be part of it in some shape or form. And the people with the really large physical zones, they have a very much hands-on approach. They like to learn through hands-on experience. And these people are incredibly important to allow them some ability and flexibility to try things so that, so they can come up with their own solutions. They don't like sitting in boardrooms for long lengths of times. They're much more active and like more into the movement of let's just try. We could have actually completed this by now, if they were left to their own devices. And of course, people with the really large emotional zones, they feel things deeply. So quite often, if you've got, as an example, someone with a large space, particularly a rounded space between their eyes and the eyebrows, they need time to feel into things and not to be rushed into making a decision quickly, because that can put them into overwhelm. And as you start to recognize some of these traits, it's not about making it right or wrong. It's just simply, this is a characteristic that if I put this person under too much pressure, they're not giving me the best results. And it creates undue pressure for them. So in terms of creating a happier work environment, it's not a good or bad, it just simply is and is.
Right. And not everybody has a face where all the three zones are equally represented. Um, the person that the persons that have the mind zone, let's say larger and wider, tend to answer very well, or you have good outcomes with them when you ask them, what do you think about whatever the topic is, right?
They like to share what they think, what their thoughts are.
Right. And the same applies also for the other zones. The people with the emotional zone, better represented, they share their feelings, or they express um, better, um, using their feelings and also words that describe that.
In principle, yes. The theory is yes,
Mhm.
but you need to also take a look at how the zones look. So if you notice someone has like a very large forehead as an example, but there's lots of lines and there's lots of stress, then you might notice that they're under a lot of pressure. And the same in the emotional zones. So um, it is fair to say that people that have large feeling zones have the capacity for very, very deep feelings.
Mhm. This brings me to the famous Einstein lines,
Yes.
because you mentioned the forehead and the lines that may appear on the forehead. When lines reach all the way up to the crown, um, what does that say about intelligence and creativity?
Highly, highly creative. Think outside of the box. They usually will have a diverse range of interests from everything and anything, but definitely up into the spiritual, philosophical concepts of, human existence, why we're here. Um, yeah, the importance of life itself.
What do habitual expressions in the forehead, deep lines, wavy lines, smooth tension reveal about someone's thinking patterns?
Okay, so the tension lines, you often notice more pressure lines that come down the sides, on the sides, and basically that indicates someone who's I'll just take it back a few slides, show you a few. Oops, took it the wrong way, sorry. What am I doing? Why is it not going back? Okay, for some reason that is not working.
What slide are you looking for?
The pressured head of the gentleman.
Let's see.
That one.
Yeah.
So when you take a look at a forehead that looks like this here, it is an enormous amount of pressure. And this one here is known as the pressure cooker.
Mhm.
So the intensity of the mind can mean that he has difficulty turning his mind off. It's always on. So again, some of the psychosomatic patterns of learning how to de-stress, how to remove some of this tension, learning how to sleep would be of assistance for this gentleman, but highly creative, thinks outside of the square, and yeah, comes up with innovative solutions.
Yeah. And the brows. The brows tell us about authority, boundaries, self trust. Could you detail a bit also about the eyebrows?
Okay, so the eyebrows in the face reading that I work with, the brow and the eyebrows treat slightly differently. So when I'm looking at the eyebrow, I'm looking at how close it is to the eyes. You'll notice that if the eyebrow is really close to the eyes, it's a sign of someone who thinks and processes quite fast. Whereas where there's a gap between the eyes and the eyebrow, then they just need a little bit more time to process. And it's not that they're not a fast thinker, but they just need time to feel into it as well. When you take a look at both of these gentlemen, but particularly the gentleman on the right of the screen, you'll notice that this area of the brow is actually raised. And not everyone has a raised brow. So it indicates someone who's highly observant, and their observation is usually super fast, super quick. They go into a room, they've read the room, they pick up on the nuances incredibly quickly.
Yeah. We do have a question
Yes.
from Mrs. Maria Magdalena. The question is, in both images, a large forehead shows a lot of pressure. No.
No.
Linda, please, it's the image on the left side
Yes.
while
So
looking at the screen.
you're looking at these lines coming down that are showing the pressure. This one is actually a pretty good, healthy forehead. There's nothing really jump out too much in regard to his forehead that would be concerning. Like to actually sort of for me to say, do you have difficulty sleeping? I see this as being quite a creative, open-minded mental processing.
Um, Now let's move to the nose. You mentioned the nose also earlier.
Yes.
But nose speaks also about one's identity. As we discussed before we enter live. Um, I ask you to also give us a bit more information about the nose and what is the nose representing and showing us.
Okay. Well, in psychosomatics, the nose is about your sense of self, your level of confidence, and how you project your personality out into the world. And it's sometimes why when people have a much larger nose, that they may not initially like their nose because they've yet to still grow into their identity. But we take a look to see also how balanced the nose is for the face. And sometimes people will come into the world and they will have some challenges that you're expecting that they will need to navigate. And you'll notice that in terms of an extroverted feature is quite large. An introverted feature is small. And this gentleman has quite a wide face. So he's got an extroverted face that's kind of like it wants to be out there.
Mm.
This part of his face is much, much smaller. So this part's going to hesitate. And that itself is going to create a lot of the tension and the pressure that he experiences of performance and having to put himself out into the world.
What do the cheeks reveal about one person?
Okay, so the cheeks reveal the nurturing style, and we're looking at the upper cheek as well as the lower cheek. I mentioned before about the upper cheek being a sign of leadership and also building trust and rapport, providing it's padded nicely with flesh. You'll often find if it's lower, so this gentleman has a lower cheek, it's not so high boned. So quite often this type of leadership will be to help others take the limelight. They don't necessarily have to be up the front, but they'll lead from behind. And the lower cheek's all about nurturing. So, yesterday I was doing some mini readings with some people I've known for a while, but they didn't actually know that I was doing face reading until I was talking to about today. And so I just gave them a little mini reading. And this girl she said, like, I knew she was an accountant. And I said to her, you may be an accountant, but you would have to be nurturing everyone in your organization, because she had all the nurturing characteristics on her face. And she's like, how would you know that? So it can
Yeah.
be.
What about the philtrum and the lips?
So the philtrum is often about the level of confidence that a person may have naturally, or sometimes a challenge that they may have with that natural sense of confidence. The smaller the philtrum, we notice this one is smaller, this one's slightly larger. So generally speaking, it can relate to confidence. So the larger, it's usually more confident. And the lips are all about expression. Large lips tend to belong to our extroverts, and small lips tend to belong to our introverts. And of course, you might know people that speak a lot that have tiny lips, but that can also be a pattern of overcompensation. The natural lips are smaller, are more introverted in their personality type. And as the lips tuck in, and we see that a lot in different professions, where it's not okay to actually say what you think, that you have to filter what you say. Politicians are amongst those. Sometimes in different occupations, journalists as well, that we see that the lips are held
Okay,
both as a micro expression that becomes a habitual expression that becomes part of form.
great. Um, we talked previously also about the chin. Maybe you can detail a bit here in, let's say, in comparing the two pictures that are on the screen.
They're not too dissimilar.
Different.
They're not too dissimilar in that they're both round. So as we're looking at the rounder chin, both of them will be quite concerned about how their actions affect other people. This one comes out a little bit further than this one. So, he may have younger, he could have been competitive. As as an adult, he may also have that same characteristic, the advocate's chin. Probably wouldn't know until I actually spoke to them, but what you notice is when the chin is very, very small. So if the chin is very small, the person has a heightened sensitivity. And usually the sensitivity is a word that as children, it's not used in a positive way. It's like, "Oh, you're too sensitive. You need to get over that." But in psychosomatics, when we use the word sensitivity, we're referring to it as the gift of sensitivity being the heightened ability to sense. And usually by the time people get into their 40s, that becomes a gift. But you can almost guarantee that during their teenage years and the 20s, it's not a gift. It doesn't feel like it's a gift. And they even hear differently to people that have more of a chunkier chin.
Mm.
So someone who's got a chunky chin, they hear sound. Someone who's got like a very, very small chin, literally they have a full body response of hearing the sound through their body. And so it means that they're more reactionary to arguments, to any heightened energy around them. So if they feel so much more deeply. So they often feel misunderstood because people don't understand exactly how they process differently to a lot of the rest of the population. If you've also got a really strong face and a smaller chin, you can push through and like literally override the nervous system, and that can quite often lead to a bit of burnout.
A bit of burnout, yes, because yeah, as you said, the people having the chin more or smaller or narrower, emotionally they are more sensitive than the others that have a wider uh, chin and face generally. How do you distinguish between a line shaped by emotion versus a structural line?
So a structural line. What would you call a structural line?
Um, Shaped by physiology or habit.
Okay. So when you take a look at, say, one of these lines in the cheeks.
If you are trying to show something, we are not seeing your pointer. So
Sorry. Okay.
no worries.
So the gentleman on the right-hand side, he's got the lines coming down his face. He's also got the dimples coming in. So as we take a look at that line is most likely going to be more within his personality makeup rather
Mhm.
than in his emotional expression. So yeah, so when it's in the emotional field, you might describe it as the emotional field is short-lived. You see a line when they're doing like a micro expression or holding an expression for a period of time. But once it becomes form, you could probably say that it's now part of an ingrained part of the personality. But in saying that, Anne, it can change as well. So lines can appear overnight and they can also disappear. So I know a lot of money is spent on Botox and different things, but when you actually understand how an emotional expression is creating a line, you can sometimes change the appearance of that line.
Yeah.
And a classic example is when you're feeling really sad and there's deep grief, and you smile through it, that creates lines that go down at the side of the mouth. So by not smiling and actually being more present with whatever emotion's happening, that will shift how that appearance of that line appears on the face.
True. You mentioned Botox. So this is also a very interesting topic. So when can Botox be helpful? And when does it interfere with emotional expressions?
It may be helpful and it may interfere with emotional expressions. So for some people, it is one of those preferences that it has to be the individual that decides. I think it is helpful, particularly where people have the jaw, locked jaw, um, grinding teeth, and an overdevelopment of the jaw itself. It can be very helpful in relaxing the muscle tension and also signaling to the brain that a different experience is possible.
Mhm.
So that can be really helpful in that situation. But Botox in certain places does limit the ability to be able to feel into certain situations. Like um, we rely on our body cues, sometimes even ahead of our interpretation of what's actually occurring. So our body responds first and then it gets interpreted. And when you become really good at reading your own body language, you might notice your hand position, your facial features. So it all starts to tell a story, and you might miss those. A classic example would be if you smile, and if everyone who's listening to this, if you just smile right now and see whilst you're smiling, if you can access the emotion of frustration or anger. And you will find that it's very difficult to access whilst you're smiling. And that's the same effect with Botox. If you're not able to have the full range of movement, then you're limiting that range.
Right. What about surgeries, beauty surgeries, like, changing your nose or modifying your nose or lips? How can this impact, I don't know, positive, negative, um, one's personality?
Yeah. If you look at, you know, someone like Michael Jackson, who had nose surgery after nose surgery after nose surgery, it showed that he wasn't really fully happy with his personality on the inside, his sense of identity. He was still struggling with his identity. And that's often the case. People get surgery, but if they haven't addressed some underlying lacking of confidence, they may not necessarily like their new look, because it's not actually about the look, it's actually about their relationship with the feature itself. Um, but also sometimes it can be really important for people to, if they've been bullied, if they've had a really hard time and they really particularly hate a feature. Sometimes I hear reports back where they go, I love my new nose. I think I now look beautiful. So it is a lot about personal preference. And I think that that's done in conjunction with some emotional work, just for people to really understand and to see if there's something else at play, rather than just simply, I want to change this feature. And plastic surgeons are much more aware of that these days than what they used to be as well.
Right. When a new line, wrinkle, or area of tension appears, what reflective questions can one ask instead of moving straight to judgment?
Okay. So it really would depend on whereabouts in the face that the line has appeared. And obviously, when you're trained into reading faces, which I teach, um, you would know the area and meaning of each part of the face. So that would make it easier. But one of the fingers, which is the middle finger, you can put your finger on the line and and just allow your body to connect in with the feeling of what's actually occurring at this line, and just to literally breathe into the body, feel into the body, and see if your body gives any insight, would be one
Why
way.
why using the middle finger?
Oh, it's one of the fingers used for pondering. It's also known as the spiritual finger. It's the mediator between the inside world and the outside world, based on hand reading.
Thank you. Well, we come to the end of our session, Linda. Face reading teaches us to meet both ourselves and others with greater kindness. Because once we understand how differently each person processes their inner world, judgment softens, empathy expands, and connection becomes possible in a much deeper way. Linda, thank you very much. The way you make the human face come alive with meaning, it's such a gift. I'm grateful you shared it with all of us today. And to everyone here, thank you for being part of Lead, Feel, Connect series. Your presence and your curiosity have made this series truly special. As we head into Christmas and the new year, I will also take a short break, and I'm excited to return on the January 29th next year with a brand new series, The Human Side of High Performance, with thought leaders, coaches, and neuroscientists joining the conversation as guest speakers. Until then, stay curious, stay connected, and lead with purpose. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you.